My mother set her glass down slowly as if she were savoring the moment. A smile curled across her face, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile a person wears when they know something you don't and they can't wait to drop it on you. Then she did it. She announced she was pregnant. My mother. Pregnant. At her age, the words already sounded impossible. But before I could even process them, she leaned across the linen-draped table, slipped her hand over my husband's, and delivered the rest of the blow. He was the father. The room spun. My brain struggled to find purchase like boots sliding in mud. But I didn't break. Their little confession wasn't the knockout punch they thought it was. No, what they lit inside me was a fuse. And they would never see the explosion coming. Because what they imagined was the beginning of their new life together. Was really the beginning of their downfall. And the beginning of my freedom. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, because this story? It doesn't end the way they thought. I can still picture that Thursday in March with terrifying clarity, as if the entire day had been tattooed onto my memory. The desert sky over El Paso was sharp and clean, the kind of blue that belongs to a place that's both unforgiving and beautiful. The air carried the faint bite of sagebrush and creosote after a rare spring rain. I remember walking out of headquarters that morning with my chest expanded like I'd just finished a perfect drill run. My commanding officer had called me into his office at dawn, and with that straight-backed calm of his, he told me I had earned the promotion I'd been grinding toward since I left active duty. Senior Operations Chief. The title rang in my head like a medal being pinned to my uniform. The pay bump, 40%, was good, but it wasn't about the money. It was about respect. About recognition. About every sleepless night I'd spent buried in field reports and logistics manuals. About every mission where I carried twice the load to make sure no one else fell behind. For years, I had swallowed frustration when someone less qualified got chosen over me. I'd tightened my jaw, doubled down, and kept moving forward, because that's what service teaches you. You endure. You push. You prove. And that day it had finally paid off. By the time I walked out of the compound gates, I felt lighter than I had in years. My boots struck pavement like the beat of a drum, each step carrying me toward a future I had earned. My cheeks actually ached from smiling. The first person I called was Marcus. My husband. His voice came through the line groggy, like I had woken him from a nap. There was a pause, a clatter of dishes in the background, and then a distracted chuckle. "That's incredible, Anna," he said. "We've got to celebrate." I told myself not to notice the way he sounded only half present. I wanted him to share in my joy, and that was enough for me in that moment. The second call was harder. I hesitated, thumb hovering over my mother's number. Our relationship had always been complicated. She had raised me after my father died young, but instead of warmth, what she gave me was expectation. Discipline. Criticism wrapped in the language of tough love. Still, when she answered and I told her about the promotion, her voice turned honey-sweet. "Oh, Anna, that's wonderful news," she said. "We should toast to this together." It was rare for her to offer celebration. I thought maybe this night could be different. I suggested dinner at Estrella, a Spanish restaurant downtown known for its candlelit ambience and shelves of Rioja stacked like trophies against the walls. It wasn't the kind of place you wandered into casually. The bills were heavy enough to scare most people off. But after this promotion, I wanted to sit in luxury just for one night. I reserved a private corner table. I wanted to celebrate properly, with the two people I believed I could trust most. My husband and my mother. When I arrived early that evening, I chose my attire carefully. A tailored black dress, cut sharp at the shoulders, paired with heels that clicked against the marble floor like a cadence. Not the fatigues I'd lived in for years, not the boots caked with dust from deployments, but something that reminded me I was more than a soldier. I was a leader. A woman who had fought for every inch of ground she stood on. The hostess led me to the corner I had requested. Away from the executives on their business dinners, away from couples whispering over wine. This night wasn't about anyone else. This night was about victory. The restaurant hummed with a soft chorus of voices, silverware clinking lightly against porcelain. A guitarist played in the background, his fingers weaving music that threaded through the golden light. I sank into the leather chair and let myself exhale. For the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At 30, I owned my home outright. I had built a career with my own hands. And I thought, foolishly, that I was surrounded by love. When Marcus and my mother finally walked in, I lifted my hand to wave. But something in their entrance made me pause. Marcus's posture was tight, his eyes scanning the room as if the price tags on the menu made him nervous. My mother, however, looked radiant. She was dressed in a way that was too polished for her usual taste. Pearls, silk, a glow that almost seemed rehearsed. I pushed the thought aside and rose to hug them both. "Congratulations, Anna," my mother said, holding me in an embrace longer than she ever had before. She wasn't known for affection, least of all toward me. But tonight she clung. I let myself smile because I wanted to believe this was the beginning of something new. We ordered a $200 bottle of Rioja without blinking. When the waiter poured, I launched into my story. My promotion, the new responsibilities, the opportunities overseas. I couldn't stop. The words tumbled out of me like rounds fired from a rifle, sharp and full of pride. But as I spoke, something nagged at me. My mother leaned in too intently, her eyes shining not with pride, but with a kind of anticipation. Marcus fiddled with his napkin, folding and refolding it like a soldier stalling before bad news. Then my mother raised her hand, interrupting me. "Actually," she said, her voice smooth and cutting through mine, "we have something to share as well." She reached across the table, entwined her fingers with my husband's and smiled. "I'm pregnant," she said. "And the father is Marcus." The sound of the restaurant dimmed into silence. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the music, all of it blurred into a distant hiss as though I were suddenly underwater. My chest locked, my breath stolen clean away. Across the table, their faces lit with the tense excitement of people who had prepared for fireworks. They wanted me to shatter. To break. To make a scene. But I didn't. I leveled my gaze at them and asked, evenly, "How long?" I can't count how many times growing up my mother reminded me that generosity was supposed to be my duty. When I won a science fair ribbon in 8th grade for building a small wind turbine from scrap metal, she ordered me to split the prize money with a cousin who hadn't placed at all. "Don't be selfish, Anna," she told me. "It's good to share." And I did. Always did. That pattern never stopped. In high school, I made honor roll while she excused her own struggles with math by blaming bad teachers. In college, when I landed a full ride through the ROTC program, she called it luck, not hard work. Even as I pulled night shifts in the library to cover books and meals. When I bought my first used Jeep, she asked the sticker price. When I finally scraped enough for a down payment on my home, she wanted to know the mortgage rate, the equity, every detail, as if studying for a test she'd never have to take herself. The flash of memory dissolved, and suddenly I was back in Estrella's golden light, the Rioja in my glass tasting like rust. I stared across the table at my mother's hand wrapped around Marcus's. 3 months pregnant, she had just admitted, since December. My birthday month. The timing stabbed me. While I had been working late nights preparing for the promotion that changed my life, she had been sneaking around with my husband. I asked her why she chose to tell me here of all places. Surrounded by strangers, candlelight and a $200 bottle of wine. She blinked quickly but kept smiling, her hand protective over her stomach. "Because we wanted to share in your happiness," she said. The cruelty of that line broke something in me. Not the betrayal itself, but the audacity to cloak it as kindness. They wanted my blessing as proof they were decent people. They wanted my collapse as proof I was the problem. It was the same tired script I'd been handed my entire life, just lit with better chandeliers. Marcus shifted, finally speaking, his words tumbling like loose change. "I know this is hard, Anna, but with the baby, we should all try to be decent." Decent. I repeated it back to him softly, as if testing the weight of the word. Did decency come up when you two started this affair? Or only now, over my wine and my celebration? The string guitarist drifted into something mournful. The waiter hovered at a distance, trained to sense when a table was aflame but unwilling to step closer. I set my menu down and asked flatly, "So what now? Move in together? Get married?" My mother answered smoothly, "We're figuring it out. In time, I believe you'll be happy for us." Happy for them. The laugh that left me was sharp, bitter. I reached into my purse, slid 2 $50 bills onto the table and stood. My chair whispered against the floor as I adjusted my black dress like it was armor. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I told them. "You've already had mine." Marcus opened his mouth. "Anna, wait." "I'm done waiting." I walked out. The golden light of the restaurant blurred into a tunnel as I pushed through the doors. In the entryway mirror I caught my reflection, hair neat, lipstick intact, eyes steady, and just behind me their reflections sitting close together, smiling like victors. Victors for now. Back at my apartment, everything looked the same as I had left it that morning, but it no longer felt like mine. His boots sat by the door, still dusty from the lot. His chipped coffee mug waited on the counter. His shirts hung beside mine in the closet, carrying his scent. The life I thought we shared was still there in fabric, ceramic, and leather, but to me it was rubble. I dropped my purse onto the counter and kicked off my heels. The click echoed too loudly in the silence. My chest was tight, but my face was expressionless, frozen into something I barely recognized. I wanted to scream, to smash his things, to collapse into sobs, but I just stood there hollow as a ghost. The city lights spilled across the sofa where we had once curled up on Fridays, where he had kissed me and told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. My phone buzzed, 3 messages in quick succession. From Marcus, at Mom's place tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. From my mother, Anna, I know you're upset but don't overreact. Marcus has always been good to you, and sometimes these things happen. Family has to hold together. Overreact. The laugh that burst out of me was jagged, bitter. My husband was leaving me for my mother, and her concern was family unity. I paced the apartment in tight laps until my fists ached from clenching. Grief cut sharp through me, rage burned hot, but overriding both was exhaustion. A bone-deep weariness, the kind that settles in after years of sacrifice that never seems enough. By midnight I was still in my dress, slumped on the couch, makeup streaked from silent tears. That's when the keys scraped the lock. Marcus stepped inside with an empty duffel bag, his face drawn tight like a man bracing for shrapnel. "Anna," he said quietly. "I just need to grab some clothes." I didn't move. "Go ahead." He lingered, then started pulling shirts from the closet. "It wasn't planned," he muttered. "It just happened. Like rain." I said flatly. He winced. She was going through a rough time. She needed someone to talk to. One thing led to another. Don't you dare reduce months of betrayal to one thing led to another. He tried again. "I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching him zip his bag. Every night I had stayed late at headquarters, chasing a future for us. He had been building a new life with her. He had the nerve to say, "She understands me." The words cut like a blade, but I held steady. No. She was just easier to impress because she never asked for more. When he finally slung the duffel over his shoulder, he paused at the door, searching my face for the woman who used to make excuses for his lack of ambition. That woman was gone. Replaced by someone colder. Sharper. Tired but unbroken. He muttered, "I'll be back this weekend for the rest." I said nothing. The silence closed in heavier than before once the door clicked shut. My legs carried me to my office, to the locked drawers where I kept every document that mattered. My hands shook as I rifled through folders, not even sure what I was searching for. Finally I reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted. "Helena," I whispered when she answered on the second ring. My throat was raw. "Marcus is leaving me, for my mother." There was silence, then her voice, steady and firm. "Anna, I'm so sorry. But listen, if you're ready, we'll make sure you come out of this with everything that's yours." "I can't let them take anything from me," I whispered, my voice breaking under the weight of it. Helena's tone shifted instantly. No more comfort, all precision. "First step, Anna. We get your paperwork in order. Do you still have your marriage license, the prenup, your financial records?" The words sliced through my fog like a flare. "Documents." For a moment my brain stalled. Then an old memory stirred, one I hadn't thought about in years. "Do you still have them?" she pressed gently. My breath caught. "Yes," I said almost in disbelief. "Yes, I think I do." And for the first time since that dinner, something flickered in me besides rage or grief. It wasn't hope yet, but it was close. The apartment was dark except for the glow of my desk lamp. I tore through file drawers, spreading folders across the floor like the debris of my own life. Bank statements, tax returns, the deed to my home. My fingers shook as I sifted, searching for something I wasn't sure had survived time. Then at the bottom of a green folder labeled marriage, I found it. A sealed envelope, edges yellowed, the county clerk's stamp still visible. Prenuptial agreement. The words jolted me awake. My chair creaked as I sat down hard, unfolding the pages. For years had dulled the memory of signing it. I'd been young, reckless, so certain of Marcus and of us. But I had listened to my attorney back then, hadn't I? Patricia Nguyen. Sharp-eyed 50, the kind of lawyer who never wasted a smile. Her voice echoed in my mind as clearly as if she were standing in my living room again. You're successful, Anna. You've built assets quickly. A prenup isn't about romance, it's protection. It makes sure what's yours stays yours. At the time I thought it was a formality. Marcus had slouched in the passenger seat of my old Honda, sunglasses on, grumbling the entire ride to her office. Do we really have to do this? It feels unromantic. I told him it was just precaution, that after years of service and saving I wasn't about to gamble my home. He laughed, careless, dismissive. Prenups are for celebrities, Anna. We're normal people, not movie stars. But when Patricia slid the papers across the desk, she read each clause aloud. Complete separation of assets. No liability for each other's debts. No spousal support, no claims to property, every paycheck, every investment, every brick of my home mine alone. Marcus nodded absently, barely skimming the text, yawning as he signed each page like it was a grocery receipt. Patricia caught my eye over her glasses. He understands? She asked. I had answered too quickly. Yes. Because I wanted to believe it didn't matter. Now, staring at those signatures glowing like neon on the page, I realized his indifference had just locked him out of everything he thought he'd gain. My heart pounded as I read line after line, airtight, ironclad, bulletproof. And I laughed. Alone in the dim apartment, the sound startled me. For nights ago I had felt like a broken soldier stripped of rank, humiliated. But now, with Patricia's clauses in front of me, I felt something I hadn't since that betrayal. Power. Marcus and my mother thought they had me trapped. They believed my career, my home, my savings, all of it, would become theirs to carve up. My mother had probably already imagined herself living in my apartment, raising her child on my dime, cushioned by everything I had built. And Marcus, poor foolish Marcus, had convinced himself he'd stumbled into comfort he didn't have to earn. They were wrong. I leaned back in my chair, the prenup spread before me like body armor. My chest felt lighter than it had in weeks. They had tried to strip me of my dignity, my family, my marriage. But the foundation I had built for myself remained untouchable. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Not about quietly signing divorce papers and vanishing. No, they had chosen to announce their betrayal publicly, to humiliate me in front of strangers, to time their triumph to my success. That image, their smug smiles reflected in the restaurant's gold mirrors, burned like jet fuel. No whispers. No quiet settlement. I would confront them face to face. I would watch their illusions collapse right in front of them. I slid the papers back into their envelope and locked them in my safe. 4 days I had been suffocating, drowning under betrayal. That night I finally felt oxygen again. When I lifted my eyes to the window, the city lights shimmered back at me, my reflection sharper, harder. The victim in me was gone. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I begin. 3 weeks crawled by. Marcus returned twice to collect the rest of his belongings, my mother always at his side like a guard. They moved around my apartment with smug little whispers, her hand grazing her belly in exaggerated motions as if to remind me of her victory. My mother called daily, her voice syrupy with false concern. Anna, you can't let bitterness eat you alive. Marcus just made a mistake. And now there's a baby to think about. We can't let this tear our family apart. This isn't a mistake, I told her, my tone like ice. It's betrayal. And their baby isn't my responsibility. Her sighs always followed, heavy and disappointed. Family should stay together no matter what. I would hang up before the fire in me said something that burned the last bridge. My father never called. He stayed silent, watching from the edges, unwilling to choose a side, but not naive enough to think there wasn't one. I could picture him in his recliner back in San Antonio, newspaper on his lap, eyes darting away whenever Mom brought it up. Meanwhile at work I kept my mask in place. I was the newly promoted operations chief, shaking hands, closing contracts, leading my team. And at night I rehearsed composure like drills before inspection. I stood in front of the mirror and practiced the calm expression I would wear the next time I saw them. The look that would say, "You didn't break me. When the time felt right, I dialed my mother's number. She answered instantly, voice falsely bright. Anna. I'm so glad you called. We've been worried. Kept my voice even. I've been thinking about everything. Silence lingered for a beat on the line before my mother rushed in, her tone sugar-coated. That's good to hear. Marcus was so worried you'd drag this out, make everything messy. I don't want messy, I replied evenly. We're adults. We can settle this like adults. No grudges. Her relief was immediate. Exactly what I wanted to hear. Maybe we can meet, talk it through, decide next steps calmly. Of course, I said smoothly. Let's meet at Estrella. Saturday night. Same table as before. Call it closure. I could almost hear her smile through the phone. Perfect. Marcus will be thrilled. Thank you, Anna. Really, thank you. When I ended the call, the smile I allowed myself was small, sharp, and anything but grateful. The following days blurred into preparation. I scanned and copied every page of the prenup, sending digital files to Helena, who responded with a crisp, airtight. They don't stand a chance. The original papers I tucked back into their envelope and slid into my purse. I rehearsed over and over the moment I would place them on the table. Saturday arrived. I dressed with deliberate care, like gearing up for inspection. A black sheath dress, elegant, severe, unshakable. Not the cobalt dress Marcus used to praise, not the soft florals my mother favored. Black was for control. Black was for endings. I twisted my hair into a bun, painted my lips blood red, and studied my reflection until my face looked calm, composed, unreadable. Perfect. The drive into downtown El Paso was quiet, the city alive with neon and spring warmth. I handed my keys to the valet, walked through Estrella's doors with my chin high. The hostess recognized me instantly. Her smile faltered for half a second before returning. Good evening, Ms. Ramirez. The same table? Yes, I said steadily. The golden glow wrapped around me as I took my place in the same leather chair, my purse resting beside me, the envelope inside like a heartbeat. The room buzzed with warmth and laughter, but I was apart from it, a soldier waiting for her cue. And then they arrived, 10 minutes late, just as I knew they would. Enough time to let me simmer, to make their entrance calculated. Marcus had his arm looped around my mother as if she were a prize. She leaned into him, belly just starting to show beneath a rose-colored dress, radiating smugness. Anna, she exclaimed, hugging me too tightly, as if we were friends meeting after years apart instead of combatants about to clash. You look beautiful. Doesn't she look beautiful, Marcus? His smile twitched nervously. Yeah, you look good. Thank you, I answered coolly, sitting back down. The envelope pressed against my side like a concealed weapon. We ordered wine, her suggestion the same vintage as before. She seemed delighted by the irony. She lifted her glass, clinking it against ours. To new beginnings. The first 20 minutes were a charade. Small talk stretched thin over the tension. My mother chatted about pregnancy cravings, possible names. Marcus nodded dutifully, rubbing her hand like punctuation to her sentences. They were trying to sell themselves as a couple in love. Not just to me but to themselves. Then Marcus cleared his throat, set his glass down. About the divorce, he began carefully. We think it would be best to keep things amicable. No battles. Just divide things fairly. Fairly, I echoed, tilting my head. Go on. The apartment, we could sell it and split the money. Same with your investments. And with your new salary, alimony could help us transition until Mom and I are settled. Mom and I. The words clanged in my ears like broken steel. I didn't flinch. Instead, I reached for my purse. Their faces lit with greedy expectation, as if I was about to hand them proof their fantasy was real. But I slid a yellowed envelope across the table. Marcus's voice thinned. What's this? Our prenuptial agreement. The color drained from his face. My mother blinked, confused. Prenup? You made a prenup. We did, I said calmly. 4 years ago. Marcus, you signed every page without even reading it. He stammered, that's not. I unfolded the papers and spread them like a deck of cards. Complete separation of assets. Everything earned or purchased remains with the person who acquired it. My apartment, my investments, my salary, they are mine. All of it. Marcus snatched the papers, scanning desperately, lips moving as though the words might rearrange themselves to save him. But even with that, my mother stuttered, marriage means community property. Assets earned during. Not with complete separation, I cut in, tapping the clause with my nail. Everything belongs solely to the person who earned it. No division. None. Her face twisted from confidence to horror. Marcus's hands shook. This can't be legal. Witnessed. Filed. Recorded, I replied smoothly. You nodded, you signed. Ignorance isn't fraud. His voice cracked. But, alimony. Waived. Page 5, Section 3. Both parties forfeit spousal support. You signed it. Marcus slumped, defeated. I leaned forward, voice soft but edged with steel. And then there's child support. My mother's eyes snapped to mine. What? Yes. In Texas, one child means 20% of the father's net income. On Marcus's salary, that's about $760 every month until that child turns 18. Plus medical cost, daycare, school fees. All on him. Her lips parted, panic breaking through her mask. She looked at Marcus, who was staring down at the table, pale and silent. I kept going, deliberate. After taxes, after child support, Marcus will bring home about $3,400 a month. Add your occasional freelance work if you even manage it, and you'll scrape by at best. Rent, food, diapers, utilities, barely survival. Certainly not the life you thought you were stealing from me. Marcus looked up, eyes bloodshot. Anna, please. Don't do this. You can't just leave us with nothing. You did this to yourselves, I said evenly. You plotted this betrayal for months, timed it for maximum humiliation, convinced yourselves I'd beg or bribe you to stay. Instead, you'll see what life looks like without me carrying it. Tears welled in my mother's eyes. Anna, I'm still your mother. We're family. Family doesn't seduce husbands, I answered coldly. Family doesn't orchestrate betrayal and parade it in candlelight. I slid the papers back into the envelope, tucked it into my purse, and laid 2 crisp 50s on the table for my share of the wine. I rose, every movement precise. At the door I turned once, catching their hollow faces in the glow. Now, I said, my voice steady as stone, you'll learn what it's like to count pennies. And I walked out, leaving their illusions to burn in the candlelight. My mother's so-called freelance work was never steady, and once the baby came, her excuses multiplied faster than her invoices. Their little home turned into a battlefield. Neighbors could hear the shouting. I'd get phone calls from her, her voice strained and pleading. Anna, you don't understand. They're barely getting by. Diapers, formula, rent, we're drowning. Couldn't you help just a little? I would close my eyes and pinch the bridge of my nose. I warned you, Mom. I will not bankroll the life you chose. You thought you were stealing a fortune. Now live with the reality you created. She'd sigh, disappointed. But the baby, that child is Marcus's responsibility. Exactly, I snapped. His responsibility. Not mine. The silence after that was heavy, her disapproval hanging on the line. I just wish family meant more to you, she whispered once. Family had meant everything to me. Enough that I refused to let it be used as a weapon against me ever again. Meanwhile, my life began to bloom in ways I hadn't dared imagine on the night of that dinner. My promotion wasn't just a new title, it was freedom. My salary grew, bonuses stacked up, and my name started carrying weight in rooms where once I was invisible. I traveled for work, tacked weekends onto assignments. Paris, Rome, Madrid. I stayed in 5-star hotels, ate meals paired with wines I couldn't even pronounce, and wandered cobblestone streets with no one's schedule but my own. At first I feared loneliness. What I found was peace, the kind that sinks into your bones after years of bending yourself around other people's needs. My apartment was quiet, yes, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every framed photograph, untouched by betrayal. My sanctuary. I also knew I couldn't hold all of it alone. That's when I began therapy with Dr. Rebecca Chin, a soft-spoken woman whose office was flooded with sunlight and stacked with books. The first time I sat across from her, fists clenched in my lap, she asked me a question that broke me wide open. Anna, when was the last time someone took care of you? I wept for 15 straight minutes. Session by session, I stripped away years of guilt and obligation that had chained me to takers. I learned that love without respect is exploitation, that family without boundaries is just corrosion, and that choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. By my 30th birthday, I was unrecognizable from the woman who had staggered out of Estrella Hollow and humiliated. I celebrated on the rooftop of my new loft overlooking the city lights, surrounded by friends who truly celebrated me. Glasses clinked, a string quartet played, and laughter carried into the night. And of course the messages began. First tentative, Anna, please, I know you're angry. But the baby should know her grandmother. Call me. Then more desperate. Expenses are so high, could you at least help with formula or clothes? You know I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. Then shameless. Marcus's hours got cut. We can't cover rent. You have so much, Anna. Don't let us fall apart. Each ping was a ghost tugging at old chains. I read them all, heart tightening, but I never replied. She had betrayed without shame, expected without guilt. Now she wanted mercy. The final message sealed it. If you ignore me, you're not just abandoning me, you're abandoning your own blood. That was when I blocked her number for good. Blood might mean something, but betrayal meant more. That night I stood on my terrace with a glass of wine, the smell of rain rising from the streets below. For the first time in years I felt untethered. Free of her envy. Free of his cowardice. Free of the endless cycle of giving and excusing. Time softened the edges, but it never erased the memory of that dinner. Even now, the sound of clinking wine glasses in a restaurant can send me back. Not to pain but to quiet satisfaction. Because I hadn't just survived. I had built something greater from the ashes. Marcus and my mother? Their empire of lies collapsed into a trailer park on the edge of San Antonio. Peeling paint, thin walls that carried their arguments into the night. Marcus's dealership career crumbled, his commissions too small to survive child support deductions. My mother's freelance work sputtered out under the weight of bills and her newborn. Their grand illusion turned into a daily struggle for gas money and groceries. My father admitted once, reluctantly, that he felt sorry for them. My mother never stopped pleading. Anna, you have so much, they have so little. Surely you could spare something for the baby. But I never did. Not because I hated the child, Sophia was innocent, but because enabling their choices would mean betraying myself again. I bought groceries a handful of times when Dad sent me receipts directly. I covered a pediatrician's bill once. But I made it clear, I would never funnel money through them. Their hardship was theirs alone to bear. Meanwhile, my own life flourished. Within 3 years, I rose from senior operations chief to executive director. My salary tripled, my name was respected in boardrooms I once only dreamed of. I bought a glass-walled home overlooking the skyline, paid in cash. My net worth crossed 7 figures before my 32nd birthday. But the greatest wealth was peace. Therapy rebuilt me from the inside out. I no longer mistook obligation for love or generosity for weakness. I learned to guard my energy, to invest only in people who gave as much as they received. I built a circle of friends who celebrated me without jealousy, who checked in when I traveled too much or worked too long. I dated carefully and eventually met Daniel, a thoughtful architect with his own thriving practice. With him, partnership didn't mean sacrifice. There was no quiet resentment, no scoreboard of who carried more. We met as equals. We grew as equals. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if Marcus and my mother ever thought of me as they lay awake, bills stacked higher than their excuses. Did she ever look at him and see not love, but the wreckage of choices built on greed? So they never admitted it. The only messages I received were the same tired pleas. Please, Anna. Help with rent. Help with groceries. Help for Sophia. I ignored them all. Because my victory wasn't in their suffering, it was in my freedom. That was the lesson betrayal left me with. Resilience is a choice, justice is a process, and freedom is the prize for those willing to fight for it. On my 35th birthday, I stood on the terrace of my home, champagne in hand, the city glowing below. Friends filled the house with laughter and music. Daniel's arm wrapped around my waist and he whispered, "You've built something extraordinary." And I had. Not just the house. Not just the career. But a life. Untouched by betrayal, unbent by envy, unbound from people who saw me as a ladder instead of a daughter, a wife, a person. I thought briefly of them then, somewhere in San Antonio, arguing over diapers and overdue bills. For a moment I wondered if they still believed their gamble had been worth it. Then I lifted my glass higher, the bubbles rising like a toast to myself. They thought betrayal would break me. Instead it set me free. and sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.